Managed Care Technical Assistance Center. I'm joined here by Boris Vilgorin and also Megan Beyer from the MCTAC team. We're so pleased to be hosting today's webinar and are going to keep this introduction quite brief. I know we've got a lot to get to, and we're also going to open things up for some discussion today. So we want to allow plenty of time for that. So before we dive in, just a couple of very quick housekeeping items. First off the top, slides and a recording of this presentation will be made available on the MCTAC website in the next few days and included in the Friday morning clearinghouse that we send around to everybody. So be sure to check back to the past events page on the MCTAC website for those resources when they're available in the next couple of days. And then also in terms of Q&A and discussion, so we've been experimenting with opening up the phone line, even with large groups of people recently, and it's been going pretty well. So we're going to try doing that today with everyone on the line when we're ready for periods of question and answer. So we will be unmuting everyone's line and allowing people to chime in, which there might be a little bit of trying to talk over each other, but we're pretty confident that if everyone just takes a second to let other people ask their questions, that there'll be a good chance for some Q&A. And then if somebody puts us on hold and we get some great hold music, we'll be sure to put that line on mute individually. If you aren't at a phone and you're listening via your computer and don't have a microphone, you can also feel free to please chat in your questions. There's a couple of features in the WebEx platform for this. There's also a Q&A feature, but we try not to use that feature just for logistics purposes. So under the chat feature, on the top right-hand corner of your screen, there's a chat bubble. You can click on that. It'll open up a chat box on the sidebar. And then we just ask that there's a drop-down towards the bottom for who to send your question to. And we just ask that you select all panelists before moving forward, just so the folks who are up in Albany, our state partners, as well as the folks here who are going to try to be emceeing the Q&A can all take a look at that as that comes in. So without further ado, we're ready to jump in. So I'm going to turn things over to Alyssa Slezak from the Department of Health to kick things off. Thanks so much, Alyssa.
Discuss the different roles. We have invited to this webinar New York City Health Homes and Care Management Agencies, New York City Plans, and Logisticare, which is the transportation vendor for New York City. So we just wanted to kind of remind folks, we've been talking a lot about non-medical transportation. We had one webinar already, and then we've been mentioning it in some other platforms such as the Health Home Managed Care work group meeting and others. So we just want to make sure that everybody's aware of the roles, and we'll just do a recap and refresh on what the actual service is and some of the components of the service. So as a reminder, I think most folks know this by now, but initially OMH and OASIS and the Department of Health designated HCBS providers. Part of this was to designate non-medical transportation providers. However, there has been guidance after that initial designation that said in order to provide the service, you have to become a Medicaid transportation provider. So if you're not a Medicaid transportation provider, then you will not be able to provide this service. If you are interested in providing this service but are not yet a transportation vendor, then you should use the link here to find out how to enroll to be a transportation provider for Medicaid. So just to recap on what non-medical transportation is, this is in addition to any medical transportation that's furnished under the state plan, and it may be available to individuals receiving behavioral health, home and community-based services in HARPs and HIV SNPs. So the only people eligible for this service are those who are HARP enrolled or HARP eligible in an HIV SNP, who are also eligible for the behavioral health, home and community-based service menu, as this is one of those HCBS services. Unlike some of the other, well, all of the other behavioral health, home and community-based services, the non-medical transportation is going to be paid fee-for-service. It is still under the benefit package, but it's just paid for a little bit differently to align with how medical transportation is paid for by Medicaid now. So just a reminder, regular Medicaid transportation would cover the trips to and from Medicaid-covered medical appointments. So non-medical transportation is different, and it covers two types of transportation, the first being trips to and from the other behavioral health, home, and community-based services that would be included in an individual's plan of care that are part of this new benefit package. And it would also cover trips to and from non-HCBS destinations that are time-limited, non-routine, and are specifically tied to a recovery goal in an individual's plan of care. So we have several examples of that in our manual. This would be things like a job interview, trip to a GED class, things like that. And they just have to be time-limited, non-routine. They have to have a start and end date in the plan of care in order to be approved. And there is a cost cap associated with this service. The cost cap is per individual per year, and the cost cap is only applying to those second type of trips that I mentioned, which are to the non-HCBS destination. This does not include public transportation and the transportation to and from the rest of the menu of home and community-based services that somebody might have in their plan of care. So again, just some other examples of the non-HCBS locations, things like a job interview, college fair, wellness seminar, workshop to prepare for the GED. The important thing is that these really have to be tied to a goal. The goal has to be documented in the plan of care, and it has to be documented, why this is an important thing for the individual to reach recovery. So again, specific time frame, and not used for routine transportation. We often use the example that a participant may be transported to a job interview, but we're not going to use the service to cover their transportation on a daily basis to and from their job once they obtain employment. So when we start to talk about the roles, this is where the non-medical transportation grid comes into play. There is a grid that needs to be provided to logistic care because they're going to be the ones that are authorizing these trips. So they need to be aware of the type of trips that people are going to be requesting, and they need to be assured that these trips are, in fact, tied to the plan of care. So the health home care managers are responsible for completing the grid, which we'll show you in just a second, and that's based on both the home and community-based services and the non-medical trips, so the non-HCBS trips. And this grid is only to be completed if an individual recovers non-medical transportation. So typically a health home care manager, when they are going to be submitting the plan of care to the MCO, should also submit the grid if non-medical transportation is required. If it's not required, there's no need to submit the grid, and the grid does not need to include any of the Medicaid-covered medical appointments. So any other Medicaid transportation that they are already receiving does not need to be in this grid. So again, the care manager will send a completed grid to the MCO along with the plan of care. And when the plan of care is approved, the MCO will forward the grid to the transportation manager, in this case for New York City, it's Logistic Care, to ensure that individuals' non-medical trips can be authorized. Note that the transportation manager also coordinates the transportation for other Medicaid-covered transportation. So many of these individuals are already receiving transportation and will already be in the system, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. If the services or goals within the plan of care require a change, then the grid needs to be resubmitted by the care manager to the MCO and from the MCO to the transportation manager. So just anytime that plan of care changes, if there's services that are changing or additional trips that may be needed or trips being taken away because an individual no longer needs them, then that just needs to be updated and sent to the respective parties. So this here just shows you the grid, and this is also available in our guidance manual that is available online. We will provide the link to that. The guidance manual talks a lot about the types of trips and the rules around non-medical transportation, and you may have already seen that before. So this grid here just includes participant information, the plan information, the transportation provider information, and then a grid with the types of trips, indicating whether or not they are non-HCBS trips, because again, those trips, the non-HCBS trips, will count toward the $2,000 per year per participant cap. So I'm just going to quickly turn it over to Heidi from the Department of Health, the Transportation Unit here.
Thanks, Alyssa. So which mode of transportation is necessary? One of the key components of Medicaid transportation in any event is to try to determine what mode of transportation an individual might need based on their individual mobility needs on a given day. So that's the charge that we've placed on Logisticare. And what we've created together is this medical justification form. We'll sometimes call it the 2015. Essentially, that is a form. It's a DOH form, and you're going to see it on the next couple of slides. But most of these folks already have one in place because, like Alyssa said, they're receiving medical transportation to their medical appointments. But in the event that they don't, you will have to submit one of these forms because we are required to have this on file to substantiate that we're approving particularly ambulette or livery level transportation. So what does the 2015 do? Well, it really requires a medical professional who's familiar with the individual's mobility needs to tell us that why that enrollee might need a particular mode of transportation. Really, it's why they cannot use public transit in New York City because New York City's transit system is so robust. The form has to be signed by a medical professional and sent to Logisticare, and then the form is actually audited by Logisticare and by the department. So, again, if anybody's using public transit, not necessary, but anything else, Logisticare is going to be asking for that form if they don't already have one on file. So that all being said, I'm going to ask Eric Stein from Logisticare to give you some input about his team and how they review these forms and what they're looking for and where to send those forms.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. So you see before you the 2015 form, and for most of you, or a good part of you, you've already had some familiarity with filling these out and sending these in. For those enrollees, which we don't have a form for, we're going to ask that you submit these with the grid so that we know specifically what mode of transportation the enrollee is going to require. What we need from the community, from your community, is good information, significant, compelling, complete information with regard to the enrollees. Every line filled out, every box checked, and on the next page, Heidi, if you would, or whoever's controlling the slides. There you go, thank you. On the next slide, you'll see some additional information, and what's most important there is there's a category which asks what is the reason, what is the diagnosis, what is the, is it long-term, is it permanent, is it temporary, and what prevents this enrollee from utilizing mass transit. And that's important to have. Actually, that would be under number 3 on the page before that. The box is actually not there, but that's where you need to put that in. That information is going to be the key to whether we're going to say yay or nay to the level of service that you're requesting. And then in completing the rest of the form, the physician, the person completing it, and all the other relevant information on the bottom, an MPI number, a telephone number, a fax number, a signature. Every piece of information needs to be completed for us to even consider entering the form into the system. And if anything is missing, our reps will call you back to find out what part is missing. That's only going to slow the process. So the more complete the more complete the form is, the better off we are in getting a one-stop shop here and getting the form into the system, getting the enrollee ready to go, along with the care plan and the care plan grid, because we're interested in the grid, not so much the plan of care, but the grid, to make sure that they get to where they need to go, whether it be on a medical level or whether it be for the HARP enrollees who are receiving non-medical transportation. Next slide. And we made it very simple for you. The grids and the 2015s that are associated with those grids, we gave you one fax number. That number is to a fax machine that's in my office and my office only. So I'm going to make sure that it gets to those folks who need to see this to approve it, to review it, and to get it into the system. Please, if you would, include the HARP Care Plan grid on the top of the 2015 as well, which will help us identify and keep those forms together. And once we see it and review it and get it into the system, you'll be ready to go. Now make sure you understand that, as was stated before, if there are any changes to the plan of care and the grid needs to be updated, we need a new update every time there is a change. Yes, in answer to that last question, the grid will come from the MCO after the care plan manager submits it to them.
Thank you, Eric.
Sure.
So this is Alyssa Slezak again. Really appreciate, Eric, your time here today and, working to be a part of this webinar. We are going to open this up at the end for questions and answers and also for dialogue, between the parties involved so we can try to work some of these things out. It is helpful that there is, one fax number, and hopefully that'll work for folks and we can open up for discussion afterwards. But one other thing that I wanted to mention as it relates to public transportation, not with the grid, but for public transportation, health home care management agencies, many of them are already enrolled in the PTAR system. PTAR stands for
Public Transit Automated Reimbursement.
Yes, so many are already enrolled in that system to be able to get reimbursed for providing Metro cards. So if health home care management agencies are not, or behavioral health home and community-based service providers are not, as long as you are a Medicaid enrolled provider, you can enroll to get reimbursed for the Metro card. So we are going to be encouraging folks to do that, and that'll be separate guidance that'll come through other listservs, the health home listserv, and we'll try to reach the HCBS providers as well if they aren't on that listserv, but we are going to be encouraging that, and we will provide instructions for enrolling in that system to get reimbursed for those cards. I know that was one of the questions that came through initially on here, but I just wanted to clarify that. So keep an eye out for that, for those instructions. Okay, and again, I mentioned that there was a guidance document that was related to this service, what's allowed and what's not allowed, and also access to the grid. We will be hopefully uploading a PDF version of the grid outside of this guidance manual. Right now it's just in this manual, but we want to do a fillable PDF that will make things easier for folks. So we will be getting that up on the web shortly. But the link here does bring you to that guidance document. Again, it includes the definition of non-medical transportation, who's eligible for non-medical transportation, and then the roles of the respective parties as we've outlined today, and then the guidelines for non-medical transportation that Logistic Care would adhere to when they're reviewing those grids. So again, just the big thing that we want to just remind folks is that this is not for routine transportation. So please, if you haven't reviewed the guidance document yet, please review that. I know at the last MCTAC training we had a lot of questions about what were routine trips and what weren't. I imagine we'll probably have some of those questions when we open up in just a minute, but we do want to make that very clear about which trips are included in this service. And also just to remind folks that this service is only for those who are HCBS eligible in a HARP or HARP eligible in an HIV SNP. So I think that's it for the slide. So Dan, if we can open it up for questions, I'll hand it back to you to help us facilitate that.
Yeah, that would be great. So I know Morgan, who's helping out on the tech end of things, can fire that up. While we go to unmute people's lines, did you want to take one or two questions off the top that have come through?
Sure. So I'm just looking at the ones that have come in through the chat box.
Yeah, we got a few additional ones that came through just to Morgan, which she just picked. So the one question was just if there's going to be training or another presentation specific to Western New York area, and how does the information, I guess, how does the information being presented today apply to rest of state?
Yeah, and a lot of these MCTAC trainings on the HCBS services are going to be repeated for rest of state. This will be one of them because we are dealing with a different transportation manager when we talk about rest of state transportation, and transportation does look a little bit different in rest of state than it does in New York City. So this will certainly be replicated as it relates to rest of state when the time comes.
Fantastic. Another question was, can CMAs enroll in the MetroCard reimbursement?
Yes, they can, and we will be providing guidance shortly on that through the Health Home Listserv, so the care management agencies can enroll, and many of them already are.
Great. So Morgan, do you want to make the lines unmuted, or are they unmuted right now? All right, great. So if folks can mute their lines if they're not planning on asking a question or just want to listen in, that would be great. Otherwise, the line should be unmuted at this point. So if anybody has a question and is on the phone, please.
Hello. Hello.
Are you asking a question?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Yes, my name is Colin Rivera. I'm working with Bright Point Health, and I'm just having a little situation with the transportation services for the client because I'm trying to get them to get all their services done. I am getting medical transportation and everything, but non-medical. It's been becoming a difficult thing for me to get them to their services. So I am just wondering, and I couldn't get the audio. I had a problem getting online. But if I do provide the MetroCard for that, will I get a reimbursement? Because actually I'm doing it out of pocket. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Heidi from Transportation. If you are Medicaid and Roll and you're providing MetroCard, you will have the ability to enroll in the public transit automated reimbursement system.
Okay, because the only reason... Go ahead.
Just to clarify for folks, the behavioral health, home and community-based services, including non-medical transportation, were not available until the 1st of this month. So there would not have been other, that's probably why you weren't able to get those trips, taken care of.
And just for a heads up.
It's for a subset of the population.
No, because just for a heads up, I was taking... No.
Yeah, just a reminder for folks to mute their phones if they're not talking or asking a question. Go ahead.
Okay, no, because I had taken that out of the pocket, and after nothing, it was just a discouragement because when I put when I put it in from my agency, it took me like 2 months to get reimbursed. But another thing is that this morning, yesterday, I had a last call deal with ElderServe, the MOCC program, and we were supposed to have transportation today, and they really messed up today.
The new good?
It was horrible. Okay, I'll go get it. Yeah, with the MLCC, they were supposed to pick us up this morning. They left us for like for 3 hours, and then when we tried to arrange the services, they gave us the runaround. It was horrible. It took us like 6 hours to get to an appointment.
Okay, so this is Heidi from Transportation. I'm sorry that you had that experience with that managed long-term care plan.
No, it's not your problem. No, I understand that.
After today's presentation, I'll get to Alyssa so she can distribute the contact information for the Technical Assistance Center of the MLCC here at the department. So
the MLCC in Gibson was wonderful, but it was just a problem with just getting the transportation, and then she tried to get a double approval because we had a mental health appointment. And then the black member.
Ma'am.
Yeah.
We've got to move on. So I just want to let everyone know that.
No problem, sweetheart. No problem.
If anyone has any additional complaints or concerns, if we could just take those offline. This is really more of, do you have questions about the grids? Do you have questions about how to communicate with the...
I'm sorry.
Hi, this is Jessica from DOHMH. How are you?
Good.
I have a... I'm sorry, am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Just a quick question. I see that there's a $2,000 cap for the non-Medicaid transportation. Obviously, the livery service fee would be whatever that particular fee would be, but in terms of the ambulette fees, do we have any, like, a range of what that might look like so that we can prepare care coordinators on how best to space this out throughout the year?
Yeah, sure. Ambulette is obviously a little bit more expensive. It's usually anywhere between $30 and $35 for a pickup plus mileage. So what we can do is get out the fee schedule for New York City so that you can kind of, estimate what the cost might be for every trip. And then, of course, Logisticare is available to help you to try to determine those costs if that's what's needed.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
So if anybody else doesn't jump in and people are thinking of questions, a couple others came in through the chat box. So again, if you're not on the phone, you can use the chat box on the upper right-hand corner of the WebEx platform. And please just be sure to chat in your question to all panelists. So something that came through, a couple of things. A few questions have come through, again, about caps. So I might try to loop those together. But before that, a question was that instead of paper or fax, is there any thought about making this an electronic process?
Yeah, actually, we had thought about that a little bit. There is some concern with sending the grids by email only because of the need to transmit some protected information. So we can very easily set up that ability, but we want to make sure that it wouldn't be a hindrance on any of the managed care plans or anybody that might be submitting those grids to Logisticare. So if that's something that you want us to pursue, then we will for sure 100% work with Logisticare on that.
A couple others, and apologies if this is kind of rapid fire, but we've got a few things come through. Someone says that there used to be a free first transportation service, but as they understand the service has been discontinued. Can you confirm?
Nothing in America is free. No, there's no free transportation in New York City.
Right about that.
And is there a penalty to participants who cancel the use of service?
There's no general penalty as long as if they have a trip scheduled with, say, a livery provider or with an ambulance provider, that they notify Logisticare if they're not going to use that service on that day. That's obviously a drain on resources if we send a transportation provider to pick someone up and then they don't show up.
Of course.
Right.
Does an organization that has a van need to enroll the van into Medicaid?
Absolutely.
Yes.
The process.
I agree.
You eligible? So here's a clarifying question on eligibility and caps. Do eligible participants have a limit to how many times they can use the service, or is it the dollar amount?
It would be the dollar amount, and again, the dollar amount applies only to the non-HCBS destination, not public transportation or transportation to the behavioral health HCBS services.
Great. So I'll take a deep breath. If anybody's on the line who has a question and wants to chime in.
Hi.
Hello?
Hello? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I know. I heard there were two people who called it who said hello at the same time, so I don't want to like jump in front of somebody else.
By all means, you should go.
Okay. I sent a question into the chat window, but I had a question. At Beacon Health Options, we manage the behavioral health benefits for managed care companies like BNS and Medicare and MetroPlus, and we're going to be the ones who are reviewing and approving plans of care. But who sends the transportation form in for non-medical transportation? Is it the behavioral health organization or is it the managed care organization?
It's the managed care organization.
Okay, great. Just checking.
Hi.
Alyssa wants to clarify something. Go ahead.
No, it is the managed care organization. We'll take that question back to see if Beacon can be submitting those grids because they, if the plan of care is going to them for review, they are going to be, seeing the grid. So we'll take that back and we will provide further clarification on that.
Right. My guess is probably we'd approve it to, we'd approve it to be done, and then I guess it might go back. I don't know. But yeah, let me know.
Yeah. Yeah, it would probably it would go to you for review as you review the plan of care, and then the question would be, would you be submitting it or would you send it back to the plan to submit? So we'll get back on that question. We'll take that back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great, and I think somebody else is trying to jump in. So, and if you're not chatting, we're getting a lot of background noise. So if you're not going to, if you're not asking a question, please mute. I greatly appreciate it.
I'm calling from, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. I'm calling from Beacon Health Options, the New York location, and I wanted to find out if we can use the non-Medicaid transportation flow.
You're the only person here to type it
Sorry, Morgan, if you can hear me, can you please mute the line where it's noise, people talking? I think it's line 38, user 38.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, now somebody's on hold. Sorry, folks. Thanks for bearing with us. Just give us 1 sec. All right, thanks. Okay.
I'm good to go, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I'm calling from Beacon Health Options. So we're the MCO. If I have a member that has an ACT team instead of a downstream CMA, am I correct to say that they can't use this transportation since they don't have a care plan and they won't have HCBS services?
Well, if somebody is on an ACT team, and OMH, feel free to chime in here. If they're in a HARP, they are going to have a care plan, and the ACT team acts as a health home care manager. I don't know if OMH wants to chime in on this.
Hi, this is Nicole Haggerty. Could you just repeat that question?
Hi, I'm calling from Beacon Health Options, and I'm trying to figure out, I thought I was told earlier that if somebody has an ACT team, that even though the ACT team acts as the downstream CMA, they won't have an actual care plan, and that they won't be eligible for HCBS services. So I wanted to know if we can still use this transportation to help assist with their goals, even if they can't get HCBS services.
So I will follow up on the logistics, but you are correct that someone who has is on an ACT team and enrolled in a health home or a HART plan even, where the ACT program is acting in the way of a care manager. The only, by virtue of being on the ACT team has transportation and funding for that built in to the ACT program. They also wouldn't be eligible for HCBS services while they're on the ACT team, so they will have a plan of care relative to the ACT team program, but not an ACT team inclusive of additional HCBS services. And so what my follow-up is, just to make sure that non-medical transportation would fall into that same category of not eligible for HCBS services. Let me just follow up on that. If it's in the plan of care for HCBS, yeah, I think I heard you say earlier that it's in the, it would have to be on the plan of care, Alyssa, right?
Correct, and it's part of that benefit package. So even though it's scored differently, it's still part of that package.
Yeah, so I don't think it would apply, but it's the ACT program has resources themselves anyway for that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great, so a few questions have come in about slide availability. So just as a reminder, if folks joined us a little late, the slides will be posted to the MCTAC website, mctac.org, under past events. We'll try to get those up by the end of the day, if not first thing tomorrow, and then a recording will be added in the next day or two. It just takes a little bit of time for it to download out of WebEx. So folks who want to revisit this great presentation and the Q&A can go onto the MCTAC website and view a recording of the presentation. A couple of other questions came in the back end that we'll get through and then turn back over to folks on the phone. So a question came through, is the dollar amount cap based on the calendar year or from when HCBS was approved?
It would be based on the calendar year.
Great. And then can participants have a quote-unquote subscription set up, or is transportation set up as needed?
Well, transportation should be scheduled as needed, but if somebody, for example, with medical care needs regular Medicaid-covered transportation to that medical care, Logistic Care will set up a standing order. But for these non-medical services, the transportation is to non-routine services, so the standing order might not be applicable.
Great. Another question came in about faxing. So just to echo the previous answer, that email was looked into, and the state was just, if I'm understanding correctly, just looking into secure transmission before moving that option forward. But it's being explored. Another question that came through, can HCBS providers enroll in Keycard or only CMAs?
It's PTAR, you mean? Yeah, it's PTAR, P-T-A-R, and yes, HCBS providers can enroll, and we're going to work to get those instructions out shortly.
Thanks for clarifying.
I do just want to point out that Logistic Care will not be approving any non-medical transportation if they don't have the grid in hand. So that grid is super important. And, the quicker you can get it done, the quicker, like Eric said, he can get it on the file so that we don't cause any disruption for that enrollee. That's not our intent, but they do have to have that grid before they're allowed to schedule that transportation.
Another question that came through is, who first pays for transportation? Is it the CMA, health home, or the HCBS provider? And then who submits the claim for fee-for-service?
Well, if transportation is provided by a Medicaid and Roll transportation provider, then the state would pay that provider directly. It wouldn't be the HCBS provider or anybody else. But if they're buying Metro cards from MTA that they're going to distribute and then seek reimbursement through PTAR, then whoever that entity is that wants to enroll and distribute those cards would prepay for those cards, distribute them, and then get reimbursed through PTAR.
Great. Can non-medical transportation be used for a client to go to and from classes, which are a part of their care plan?
So long, oh, Alyssa?
Well, it would depend on the nature of the class. I mean, if we're talking like a college class that they attend, you know, on a weekly basis or multiple times a week, something like that, it would be considered a routine trip. If it's a class that is kind of like a one-shot class, that they're just taking like a, I don't know, some kind of wellness class or something like that, then as long as that's tied to their goal and their plan of care. But it just isn't for like routine classes, something that's regularly scheduled that they're going to need transportation to on a regular basis.
Great. So we'd like to turn things back over to folks on the phone. So again, if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to unmute your own line and jump on in. And if you're not speaking, if you can just keep yourself on mute, it's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I would like to, this is Bill Willis from UBA Montefiore. I would just like to follow up on that last answer, because in one of the slides there were a series of examples of what could be covered as long as it's in the plan of care, and it seemed to me that it differed a little bit from what I just heard. So preparatory classes for GED and, you know, going to plays to, you know, if that's a goal to get more involved with the arts, for example, seem to be suggested as activities that would qualify, and those could be considered routine, I would think. So could you clarify that a bit, please?
So the trips that are approved, the non-routine trips, anything, there needs to be a start and an end date articulated in the plan of care. If it is a short-term, you know, class, maybe there might be more than one class, but there is a start and an end date associated with that that is documented in both the plan of care and in the grid, then that would be an allowable trip. But something like class that somebody attends, you know, all week long because they're in college, that's not going to be something that counts. That's a routine trip. So I'm not sure if anybody else wants to jump in with clarification from OMH or transportation.
What if, Alyssa, as these examples come up, is there a place where people can send them to determine to the state so that the state can weigh in on them on an individual basis?
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have an email that would, you know, I could give my personal email, but I think maybe we can try to look into maybe setting up a mailbox for those types of questions. So maybe we can get back to folks on that. I'll jot that down.
It's just I'm seeing a lot of them popping up on the chat box over here, so that might be a good way to address those.
Yeah, and we're at MCTAC, we're putting them together as well, so we'll share that with you. Okay.
I have two questions.
Great.
One is, where on the plan of care should the transportation be listed? Would it be under the HCBS recommended services?
Yeah, because this is part of the HCBS benefit package, so it would be listed there.
Okay. And the second question is, where do we get the grid? Will it be on the HCS, or should we just print it from what we get from MCTAC?
As of now, it's on the the OMH website, I'm sorry, in the guidance document, but we are trying to get that in a fillable PDF to be posting online as well. So hopefully folks can download it right from there. We'll post it with the guidance document.
And at some point, Alyssa, we will have it up on the Logisticare website as well, so that it's just easily accessible for everyone.
Okay.
Great. Are there more questions from folks on the phone? I know a couple have come through in the chat box that we'll just rattle through. One, how long do you expect it to take to get approval for non-medical transportation?
Well, it depends on the information that's submitted to Logisticare. It can be anywhere from a couple minutes to a couple hours to even, you know, if they have to go back and forth, it can be a day or so. So that's why Eric was suggesting send us as crisp information, complete, succinct as you can, so that his staff can really review it and get right back to you. But they're aware that it's not our intent to be disruptive to somebody's care, so they are looking to approve these very, very quickly.
I would just add to that the medical justification on the 2015 forms is very important. You should, if there's some medical reason why an individual has to go in a mode higher than public transportation, it should be very clear, and whatever their disability they have should be connected to the type of mode that they need. If the justification is insufficient on the 2015, Logisticare is obliged to contact you and review that determination, and that can hold up the assignment of a trip.
We've also gotten a couple of really good questions about staff transportation. So we just would chime in that that's being worked on as we speak, and we expect to be including that in some upcoming training in the next few weeks, if not the next month or so. So stay tuned on that front. So just turn things over to the phones one last time, one last call for questions before we wrap up for today. Very good. Okay, well, I'll just take the chance to thank Alyssa and Heidi and Eric, as well as our other partners at the state who jumped in from various questions and answers today. And to thank everyone for doing a great job muting and unmuting their phones as we did the interactive part of this webinar. So again, the slides and recording will all be posted to mctech.org under past events. The slides hopefully later today, and the recording in the next day or two. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone at future webinars and trainings.
Thank you.
Thanks.